Shalom TV's exclusive television coverage of Israel in turmoil is made possible in part by Barbara and Arthur Wernicke, Gwen and Ken Asher, Edith Sammers and Ed Smith, Mimi and Saul Cohen, Eleanor and Mort Lowenthal, Joyce and Robert Selig, and Naomi Vilko, MD.
I'm Mark Golub, and if you've been with us over the past few weeks during this current crisis in Gaza, you know we've focused both on Operation Protective Edge itself and on the way in which the American media is portraying the conflict on American television and in print. And we've been bringing you an array of outstanding minds, each with their own perspective, who speak to the key issues during this struggle. And one of the things we especially want to do is give Israelis the opportunity to speak in their own voice. And one of the most vocal of all Israeli columnists in Israel is Jerusalem Post columnist Carolyn Glick, author of the controversial book entitled The Israeli Solution, a One-State Plan for Peace in the Middle East. Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us on Shalom TV.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your program.
We haven't talked at all, Carolyn, since Operation Protective Edge began. I just want first your sense of whether you think it's being successful. Has it gone the way you would have wanted? How do you assess it overall?
Well, I think that Israel is facing incredibly difficult conditions, both militarily and diplomatically, and that it's playing its limited cards extremely well. But it is a very, very complicated environment right now that Israel is operating in. In large part, one of the main contributing factors to the complexity is the fact that the United States is siding with Hamas against Israel. And the absence, not only the absence of active American support diplomatically, but the absence of that and its replacement by American support for Hamas's demands of Israel and Egypt has really not only complicated matters, but has made the situation unprecedented in its level of complexity and the challenge that it presents to Israel.
Mm-hmm. All right. Right now, you're visiting. You're from Chicago, correct?
Right.
And you're visiting Chicago. You're going to be heading back to Israel in a couple of days.
Right.
But as a result, you've had a real chance to see how American television and how the New York Times and American media is portraying the Operation Protective Edge every single day. And Carolyn, it is just brutal the way Israel is being battered as far as, from my own perspective. I want to first ask you to explain more what you mean when you say that you feel the United States is siding with Hamas. In what way do you see that happening?
Well, last Friday night, John Kerry submitted to Israel a draft ceasefire agreement. And the ceasefire agreement that he submitted was Hamas's ceasefire agreement. It included every single one of Hamas's demands against Israel, and most importantly, opening up Gaza's borders with Israel and Egypt and the Mediterranean Sea in order to enable Hamas to resupply and receive money. And Israelis were just in shock. I mean, the cabinet was in a state of shock when it received this draft ceasefire by the Americans, although they shouldn't have been in shock because the week previous to that, the Americans worked with the Qataris and the Turks to scuttle Egypt's early ceasefire deal, which would have blocked Hamas from gaining anything and for their aggression against Israel, and again served as a facilitator of Hamas and diplomatic support for their terrorist demands against Israel. And so, but a week ago, when the Israeli cabinet rejected Hamas terms, the American media really attacked Secretary of State Kerry for having adopted them as America's position, and attacked him for being incompetent, and attacked him for alienating America's allies in the Arab world and in Israel. they sort of went to ground for a week, and then today it was reported that the United States is doing the exact same thing that it had been doing previously, which is that there are ceasefire talks under the aegis of the Egyptian government going on in Cairo right now, and Qatar and the United States are again teaming up to try to scuttle the Egyptian ceasefire by offering a ceasefire terms of their own that are more amenable to Hamas's demands against Israel. And this is the third time now that the United States has been doing this, and what it shows is that it wasn't an innocent mistake by Kerry either the first time or the second time. This was part of an overall American strategy in this war that places the United States squarely on Hamas's side against Israel, which is why the United States has only one policy in this war, which is to force Israel to accept Hamas's ceasefire terms, which would render Hamas, would grant it a strategic victory over Israel and would really, really, really hobble Israel's defenses in the long term and even in the short term, and it's an absolute disaster. But that's what the Americans are doing. And I would also add, when you talk about the media hostility towards Israel, that yesterday we saw two instances, just alone, of senior American officials fanning the flames of anti-Israel public sentiment on television. First, State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki attacked Israel for supposed death of children in an Israeli airstrike against outside of a UN-run school in Rafiah in southern Gaza.
That's right.
But the fact is that footage of the dead showed that only one of the people who were killed in the bombing was a child. The rest of them were military-aged men, meaning that Israel had used minimal force. Israel had almost only attacked terrorists. And yes, any child killed in hostilities is a tragedy, but this child, like all the children in Gaza, were killed by Hamas, which is using them as human shields. And the attack did not occur inside of the UNRWA installation. It occurred outside of it, outside of the perimeter fence. So the whole American claim was wrong. And then Psaki said that Israel isn't allowed to attack in areas where civilians are present when operations are being carried out against it from those areas that civilians are present in. But that's, as others have pointed out today, that is a complete abrogation of the laws of war. The laws of war stipulate explicitly that you are allowed to attack all military installations, all military operations of your enemy in times of war. And the presence or absence of civilians adds or detracts nothing from the lawfulness of such operations. When you see the limited, minuscule, in a larger sense, civilian casualties that were caused by this, and you understand that what Israel did was completely lawful, you see that Jen Psaki's statement was not only untrue, but it was maliciously so, and it libeled Israel out of malice. And then the same day, yesterday, Valerie Jarrett, the president's closest advisor, went on Face the Nation and accused Israel of killing children. So, you in so many words. And so you're having these statements being put out by administration officials libeling Israel, and it's hard to just blame the media for taking a hostile position against Israel, although they certainly are blameworthy. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of this hostility is being pushed out by the administration itself by issuing these slanderous assaults against Israel.
So, Carolyn, if you believe it's malicious, what's the purpose? At the same time, we hear over and over again, thank heaven for the U.S. support of the Iron Dome, and that, the Obama administration gets all this credit for giving arms to Israel. Why, in your mind, would the United States be undermining Israel by siding with Hamas?
Look, you have to understand there's a very interesting dynamic going on between the United States and Europe right now. European leaders have issued statements that are more sympathetic towards Israel than the United States has. And recently, actually over the past 2 days, their anti-Israel rhetoric has been sharpening. particularly in France and in Britain today. But what we've seen really in the behavior of the European governments versus the European publics is that European governments are by and large more supportive of Israel than their publics are. In the United States, the reverse is the case. The Obama administration itself is far less sympathetically inclined towards Israel than the American public is. So what the Obama administration is doing in agreeing to resupply Iron Dome and resupply the Israeli military is it's trying to present a position to the American public of support for Israel when its actual positions on the ground are hostile to Israel. So, Iron Dome passed unanimously in both houses as a reflection of the overwhelming American public support for Israel. And so there's no way that the president wouldn't resupply Iron Dome, just like there's no way that he would risk that sort of public condemnation if he were not to resupply Israel with the mortar shells that it's using right now. And so you have this resupply going on because it is widely supported by the American people, but on the other hand, you have this diplomatic positioning of the administration and other administrative acts, like, for instance, the unprecedented, malicious, double standard that was used against Israeli civilian air traffic by the FAA a week and a half ago when they closed down Israel's skies to civilian air traffic from abroad, something that has never been done, not in Iraq, not in Pakistan, not in Yemen, not in Afghanistan, not in Ukraine, and it was done against Israel. And there's no objective criterion through which the FAA could argue that it was reasonable under the circumstances and overall FAA policy towards civilian airline traffic to have closed down the air paths for civilian passenger jets to Israel. But they did it anyway. And these are the kinds of actions that show what the intention of the Obama administration, specifically the Obama administration towards Israel, is, and their positions on the ceasefire that have been consistently siding with Hamas against Israel, and their constant insistence that Israel interrupt its operations in the middle for humanitarian ceasefires, which, as we saw again for the fifth time on Friday morning, are exploited by Hamas in order to gain the initiative and cause more Israeli lives to be lost in battle.
Okay, I want to, though, come back to the same question again. You described something very, very well. I don't hear what you think the why is. And I know you may be speculating.
The reason why is because under the Obama administration, the United States has realigned the American alliance structure in the Middle East away from America's traditional Sunni allies and away from Israel and towards Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood. We see it in country after country. We see it in their position regarding Iran's nuclear weapons program that the United States has adopted a policy. In facing the opposition of two houses of Congress, they have done it. That is enabling, that is facilitating Iran's acquisition of nuclear weapons. We saw it in 2009 in June when the Green Movement rose up and tried to overthrow the Iranian government, and Obama, from his earliest days in office, sided with Iran against the Iranian people that wanted a democratic overthrow of the government. We saw it in Egypt from the time that the Muslim Brotherhood took over Egypt from long-standing 29-year U.S. ally Hosni Mubarak, who was the anchor of the U.S. alliance system in the Sunni Arab world. The United States contributed to his overthrow, supported the ascent to power of the Muslim Brotherhood, and since the Egyptian military came in July of 2013 and overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood before it had the opportunity to transform Egypt into an Islamic state, the United States has been, under the Obama administration, seeking to weaken the Egyptian military and reinstate the Muslim Brotherhood in power. We saw it in Libya, where the United States supported a European operation to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, who had become a neutered dictator since 2004 when he effectively ended his support for terrorism and turned his nuclear weapons program over to the United States. And the United States overthrew him, and what we've seen now is the rise of al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood in Libya in a way that we had never seen before anywhere. And, of course, in Iraq, where the United States is enabling the Iranians to take over southern Iran, and the Shah al-Arab waterway is sitting back and relaxing while ISIS takes over northern Iraq. is saying that it's giving humanitarian aid and very concerned about the humanitarian situation in Iraqi Kurdistan as ISIS advances on more and more towns on the outskirts of Kurdistan. And the United States does nothing. In all of these actions, the United States' actions, the policies of the Obama administration have served to harm U.S. allies, whether they're Israel or Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, or anyone else, and have aided America's allies that are aligned and associated with the Muslim Brotherhood and with Iran, and including Iran and Iran's nuclear weapons program. So when you look at the record of the administration on the ground, it beggars belief that this is anything but their intention. Again, when Kerry first sided with Qatar and Turkey against Egypt's ceasefire 2.5 weeks ago, it might have been a fluke. It might have been an error in judgment. When he did it again a week and a half ago, you could say, well, he still hadn't learned his lesson. After he had been pilloried by the American media for doing so over the past week, the fact that again today he is seeking to undermine Egypt's brokered ceasefire between the Palestinians and the Israelis and seeking to insert a new ceasefire into the mix that will enable Hamas to achieve its military objectives. I don't see how you can logically reach the conclusion that he's trying to do anything else other than support Hamas in its war against Israel, period. There's no other way of looking at it, as far as I can see.
And what do you think, then, from his perspective or the administration's perspective, what's the end game for them? What would they hope come out of a conflict in the Middle East where in some way Hamas not only survives, but survives with a greater sense of credibility in the Arab world? What does it do in the geopolitical picture, and why does it benefit Obama's vision of what the United States foreign policy should be?
Well, first of all, he's made it clear that his foreign policy is to distance the United States from Israel and to weaken Israel. As he told American Jewish leaders in one of his first meetings with them, if not the first meeting that he held with them in 2009, when he said it was time to put distance between, or daylight between the United States and Israel. And everything that he's done since then has put distance and daylight between Israel and the United States. That's one. But the other thing is that it's very clear that the centerpiece of Iran's Middle East policy is to try to embrace Iran as an ally of the United States while it is an enemy of the United States, actively working to undermine both U.S. national security and the survival of U.S. allies in the region. But that's what they're trying to do. Now, if you're trying to appease Iran, and Hamas is effectively a proxy of Iran, then you don't want to be seen by the Iranians as supporting Israel against their proxy. And so I think that in part you have to look at their support for Hamas in this war against Israel as a means by the Obama administration to try to again demonstrate, as if they needed to demonstrate it again, their good intentions towards the Iranian theocracy.
Okay.
Now, I mean, that's an immediate goal on their part, but I think, again, their goal is to realign the United States in the Middle East. Because of that, they are alienating and weakening all of America's allies. I mean, just yesterday you had the Saudi king unbelievably siding 100% with Israel against Hamas and telling on television and telling Hamas that they were bringing a massacre on their own people, blaming Hamas for the violence. This is Saudi Arabia, for crying out loud. And this is the opposite, the exact opposite of what the State Department spokeswoman said. She sided with Hamas against Israel on the same day.
So, for one moment, there are American Jews and American non-Jews watching you all over America right now on Shalom TV. And one of the things that they're seeing every day, and you mentioned it already, is not only are the visuals very disturbing, but the way in which they're discussed by anchors, whether it's Joe Scarborough on MSNBC or whether it's any one of the Sunday morning talk shows. And the suggestion is that as much as somebody like Joe Scarborough says he is and I believe it, he's a staunch supporter of the State of Israel, when he sees Israel killing 5-year-old and 6-year-old Palestinian children, he just finds it, he finds it unacceptable. And in many ways, Carolyn, that is what well-meaning people are experiencing right now. It looks as if Israel is targeting UN schools where refugees are hiding after fleeing whatever neighborhoods they live in, and then lo and behold, Israel blows those schools up. That's the way it's being portrayed. And on MSNBC, after 16 times, Israel was warned that the refugees were in this particular building, and yet Israel still bombs it. So the question is, how would you explain to the American people who are seeing this day after day after day, what would you want them to keep in perspective? How do we view this in a fairer way for the state of Israel?
I mean, the way that the visuals are being portrayed is mendacious and deliberately so. I mean, the notion Israel didn't bomb the school. I mean, that's just what I got through telling you. The school was not bombed. Israel attacked Hamas terrorists that were operating next to the school, which was an act of perfidy. It was a war crime. It was a war crime. What they did was a war crime. Israel was acting lawfully when it attacked them and when it killed them in combat operations. And the fact that they had a civilian with them outside of the school when Israel used minimal force in order to neutralize the threat that they manifested to Israel's security, that is the fact.
Yes.
That is the fact. Now, if people, want, what can I tell you? You can lead a dog to water, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink.
Right.
Is Joe Scarborough, has he never read a poem? Is he incapable of abstract thought? Is he incapable of a complicated understanding? Can you not explain to him a set of circumstances and have him be able to understand it rationally? Is he so moved by emotions that he has the sophistication of my 5-year-old son? Is that what you're telling me, that he's an idiot? He may be an idiot because if he thinks that he supports Israel when he's willing to look at mendacious images presented in a mendacious, deliberately slanderous manner on television and believe them, then, he might as well believe the depictions of Israel and Jews as long-nosed people who run around counting money and drinking blood. Because that's the level of sophistication of the images that he's seeing right now. And the fact that he can't distinguish between them and the truth is really a very sad commentary on his intelligence, not on the morality of the state of Israel and our military in this operation.
Good for you. Okay, one more issue. So Ali Jabari writes an op-ed piece today in the New York Times in which he tells the world that the Palestinians are ready to make peace. And the real reason we don't have peace between Israel and the Palestinians is every time we get close, Israel scuttles it. And Israel does not want to make peace. And then he says two things. Actually, I'm not even going to quote one of them. It's so outrageous. But he quotes Ayelet Shakad, a Knesset member in the home party, arguing that basically Israelis should murder the mothers of terrorists so they will not bring other, quote, snakes into the world. And this is the piece that is in the New York Times. And what it does is suggests that Israel is not only unwilling to make peace, but there's something malicious and callous, unfeeling, and that the entire problem is Israel's inability to live in peace alongside the Palestinians. What would you have us know about this piece by Al-Jabari?
That is a complete lie, and that the New York Times knows it. Ayelet Shaked is a friend of mine. Ayelet Shaked did not write what he claims that she wrote. That was a malicious distortion of what she wrote. She wrote nothing of the sort whatsoever. And, what they did was they said, oh, look, let's attack her because she's an attractive young woman, Israeli parliamentarian, who has positions that we don't think that pretty young ladies should take. They should all take positions that are anti-Semitic, and therefore we're going to lie completely, not take out of context, but completely make up a position and say that she said it when she never said anything of the kind, and now she's running around saying, I didn't say it. Now, how can you expect to get business done when you're wasting all of your time sitting around saying, I didn't say what you're saying that I said? What does that mean? I mean, can you imagine what sort of people are these that can completely invent statements by public figures and claim that they said them in order to demonize them? Now, what happened to Ayelet Shaked on an individual level, and we see how far this poisonous knot gets around, well, how do you expect a nation to deal with it? I mean, Israel is doing the best that it can, but, you know, the more and more vicious and venomous these libels against Israel and our leaders become, right, the less we can care about them. You know, I mean, Ben Rhodes, the deputy national security advisor, had an unbelievable statement when he was interviewed by CNN's Candy Crowley a week ago. He said to her, she said, what can Israel do that it isn't already doing to minimize civilian deaths in Gaza? And Ben Rhodes came back and said, it can always do more. So what he said was, Israel will never be able to do enough, no matter what it does, no matter how much it endangers its own men in uniform and its own civilians in order to protect Palestinian civilians who are being used wittingly and unwittingly by Hamas, willingly and unwillingly by Hamas as human shields. We will never accept that Israel is moral. We will never side with Israel. We will never say that Israel is behaving lawfully. We will always say that Israel can do more. So when this is the position of the administration, of the White House, that they will never acknowledge that Israel is taking risks that nobody else has ever taken, including the U.S. military, to protect civilians from harm in Gaza, that they will never, ever side with us, despite everything that we do, then what he's saying is that we shouldn't care anymore about what the Americans say. He's saying, you are on your own. Not only are you on your own, I have just told you, Israel, that we, the Obama administration, will undermine you at every turn because that's what we want to do, and you will never, ever be able to appease us. And I'm telling you, you know, as an Israeli, as somebody whose children are subjected to these physical onslaughts, the fact that people are second-guessing our prime minister and judging us to be immoral in the face of the utter reprehensible nature of our enemies and the lengths that we've gone through in this war and in every war we've ever fought to protect enemy civilians and combatants from themselves and from their leaders. It just shows that this world is not only upside down, but that anti-Semitism is coming roaring back. And the reason that Israel was established was to protect Jews from this, and that's exactly what we have to do, period, full stop.
Carolyn, I love speaking with you, and I love the fact that you have a platform here on Shalom TV. I still really hope one day, and I know how busy you are, as you pass through the New York area, you'll come and sit with me at this table. But I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate the time. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha, and I will continue to reach out to you, whether it's on the phone or in person. And I thank you very much for being part of Shalom TV.
Well, Mark, I hope very much that I'll be able to come and join you in your studios in Fort Lee after Israel has won this war and the American government has come to its senses. So thank you very much, and thank you to all of your viewers for their support for Israel.
Thank you, sweetheart. You be well. Have a safe trip home. Nesiya tova.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. The thoughts of Jerusalem Post columnist Carolyn Glick and the author of The Israeli Solution, a one-state plan for peace in the Middle East. And Carolyn articulates a very hard line when it comes to her criticisms of the Obama administration during Israel's war with Hamas. Many may disagree with her, but many may find her insights thought-provoking. In any case, I hope you'll stay with us for Shalom TV's ongoing coverage of Israel in turmoil. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.